Hello and welcome to Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
In today's episode, we want to cover something slightly more maybe exciting or interesting. We want to cover what is value-based pricing.
Value-based pricing, it's a method that people are starting to use a bit more, but there's still quite an element of confusion about what it is.
To some extent, I'd almost say it's a bit of a holy grail in the pricing community. A lot of people want to move towards it, but there's still, certainly, like in the vast majority of companies, there's a reluctance or a misunderstanding or something holding people back.
And it's also something that still seems to be in the hands of consultants more than the business community. But we'll get onto that maybe at a later date.
So, Joanna, what actually is value-based pricing?
I suppose in theory, it's a price setting method whereby you set your prices based on what your customers perceive as valuable about your products. And other people say setting prices based on your customers' willingness to pay.
Yeah, I suppose you could think of it as a customer purchasing a product or service at a price that they're happy with, a price that they think is a fair reflection on the value, in inverted commas, the value, whatever that may be, that they're receiving. So they don't feel they're paying too much. You know, they don't really care if they're paying too little, but they don't feel they're paying too much for the value that they are receiving.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the tricky part, knowing where that best price, that sweet spot of pricing is for different customers, because everybody knows we're all different and we're all willing to pay different amounts. And I think this is where people, maybe businesses, get a little bit sort of maybe confused or a bit reluctant to use it, because it's very difficult to know how many, because there's so thousands of millions of people out there prepared to pay different prices. So, what's the best way to control value-based pricing in a business?
I suppose in the last episode we touched on cost plus pricing, and we discussed one of the big pluses of that is that it makes sense to many people, certainly from a finance background. It's easy to understand. Easy
to use and apply.
Yes. And I think this value-based approach, it's almost the polar opposite. I'll be honest, it sounds hard.
Yeah, and I suppose in many ways it's not easy, but it's applying rigor and discipline to the price setting process. You need a set of rules. You can't just dive into it. There's science, there's mathematics, there's economics, there's psychology all involved in that, which, I think I'm making it sound even harder. But I suppose, to say it's easy, it's not.
I think for people who haven't, who are listening to the podcast, who don't know much about value-based pricing, I think we'd like to give two examples that might make it clear to you how it works in a real-world example. The first one I'll give is the concept of rebadging cars. In the auto industry, certain factories manufacture cars and they come out the production line and there's a different badge stuck on them at the end. And what we see is fundamentally the exact same car, except a badge, can be sold in the same markets at different prices. And so we're not trying to trick the customer, but the customer is actually putting value on very different things, not just the car itself, but items such as brand prestige, perhaps financing packages, lots of different things.
So I suppose here it's the job of the business to really work out segmentation. Really, value-based pricing becomes much simpler when you understand your market and you break it up into manageable sort of groups. You group your customers. Because from that example, you've got the same product. It's pretty much the same. It's just how your customers perceive that product, which adds that additional price premium. But just because you can add a price premium doesn't mean you overcharge customers. I think very often value-based pricing is seen as an overcharging method, but I think that's actually incorrect. Value-based pricing is adjusting prices to the market. It's actually creating fairer prices.
Another example we'll give, I saw Joanna come in today and she had a new handbag. I don't know about handbags, but it appears to be an expensive one. And I suppose in that context, the cost of manufacturing the bag, I don't know, does it even have anything to do with the price of selling it?
Well, again, we're going into psychology here. Why do women buy handbags? I suppose it comes down to things like prestige, could be status. These are things called value drivers. And it's the job of a pricer to find out what the unique value drivers are. And from here, set prices based on those types of qualities. They're not always tangible qualities. They're intangible, psychological value drivers. They can be emotional value drivers and things like that. They're not just financial.
And I suppose we'll finish up whereby we'll say those items, those more non-financial reasons, that's something that makes a lot of people, certainly in the finance profession, a bit scared, I think, of value-based pricing. But I'd also like to finish by saying I'm very glad that the value drivers driving expensive handbags and luxury products don't apply to me, so I don't purchase them.
Well, I think this also comes down to having a diverse team. You do need different disciplines to get involved in the price setting process so that you can ensure that you're charging the right price for the product and using a range of different methodology to ensure that the price is the correct one.
I think we'll leave it there today. So we'll say thanks again for listening and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.